Hello and welcome to Fintech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Ritik Malhotra, founder and CEO of Savvy Wealth. Savvy Wealth is a digital platform that allows advisors to basically administer and manage their investment business in a modern, automated, and sleek way. And with that, here's my interview with Ritik. Ritik, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Excited to do this.
So, Ritik Malhotra of Savvy Wealth, tell us about Savvy Wealth.
Absolutely. So Savvy Wealth is a modern platform designed for advisors to run their practice. We essentially help these advisors automate away the middle and back office, the non-client facing pieces using our technology platform, along with the operational capabilities, compliance capabilities, and marketing capabilities for them to be able to run a more modern practice, drive a much richer client experience, and grow their business without dealing with the mundane of the middle and back office type work.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about how you accomplished that in a moment. Let's talk about the origin of Savvy Wealth. How did it come to be?
Yeah, so this actually starts with another venture I was running. My background, I've started and sold 2 technology companies in the last about 10 years. And the reason that's relevant to the story at Savvy is the first time we did that, when we sold our first company, was to a company called Box, a cloud storage provider, publicly traded now. That acquisition happened in 2014, and Box went public in 2015. And it's that at that moment, what I would say I had a good quote unquote problem, which was had life-changing amount of money from the acquisition, but didn't really know what to do with it. And I got the advice to go find a financial advisor, and really didn't even really know where to start first, but ended up actually working with folks in the industry that had run wealth management divisions at other banks and just others that knew the industry, and asked them to teach me everything that they knew, just what makes a good financial advisor, how does the industry work, what am I supposed to be asking? And really over a 6-year period. So from that point, when I was looking for an advisor in 2015 to starting Savvy Wealth in 2021, what I effectively learned were 2 big pieces. The first was from a client's perspective, my own perspective. What I realized is finding the right advisor, finding that fit is super important. This is at a time, especially when the headlines all said that the robo-advisors of the world are going to take over the industry and disintermediate the financial advisor. But just thinking about it, even back then, that never made any sense to me, because when I found the right advisor, they added a ton of value, helped me through a number of different decisions, something that a robo could never do.
Yeah, it's the classic engineer's explanation that everything's a transaction that can be automated. But no, it's anyone who's actually had a proper experience knows it's not doable.
Exactly that. And there's so much more to it than that, and all the nuance of understanding the client.
Yep.
And really, that was the first thing where I realized, hey, finding the right advisor is really important, except the experience of working with one was still highly antiquated. I remember snail mailing my documents, no dashboards, phone calls for most things. So it was a little bit puzzling. But talking to more and more financial advisors, I spoke with about 100 plus of them over the years, and they all had a similar theme that they would allude to when they would talk to me about their pain points, which was they valued the client relationship. The clients valued their advice, but they weren't happy with the way that they were limited in how they could actually work with their clients, specifically around what technology and tools that they had available to them were generally limited by the firms that they were at, red tape at the firms, compliance issues, et cetera. And even though financial advisors that broke out and started their own firms would complain about the fact that they would spend over 50% of their time just sifting between 7 to 8 different point solution softwares, didn't integrate with each other, copying data from one system to another, and just over time, just spending less and less time in front of the clients and more in front of this middle and back office style work. That's really those 2 things really came together for me over that 6-year period. And frankly, I was actually looking for companies to invest in that were going to fix this problem. But looking at the landscape, I had never found any conviction around the approaches. And by 2021, at this point, we had sold our second company. That had become actually the corporate wealth management arm of a larger fintech. So it had experience running a corporate wealth management business. At this point, I loved the industry. I used to give lectures on personal finance to new college grads. And basically at this point said, let's go and solve this problem. Been thinking about it for 6 years. And that's how we started Savvy.
Excellent. You fell in love with the industry. Good to know. And you said to yourself, there's got to be a better way. And absolutely, there's got to be a better way. So talk to me about the initial thoughts and the approach. Before we start getting into the digital experience and how that all works, talk to me about how you decided to tackle the problem.
This was a unique one where even before starting the company, we thought a lot about this of what is the approach? How do you bring a product into the market? And let me talk about how most companies have done it so far. Either there's almost these two large approaches out there, which is number one, the kind of the aggregator model where these firms generally backed by private equity will come in and effectively aggregate different financial advisors into one entity and give them a shared services experience. Then there's the other approach, which we saw, which was companies developing software and selling it to existing advisors. When we looked in kind of both the different models, we saw merit in both of them of why each of them worked. But what we found is that there was no combined solution, which we really felt compelled to build, where we would be the firm that actually builds the technology, but instead of selling it and making it sellable or satiable for other firms, we would actually just be our own consumers of the technology that we develop. So that actually leads to our business model today, which is we are a full stack wealth management firm. We are a registered investment advisor. That's our subsidiary under the Savvy Wealth umbrella called Savvy Advisors Inc. That we actually go and bring in our financial advisors who already have a book of business, and we are looking to empower them. And instead of having them set up their own RIA or continue to do that and deal with the hassles of your own LLC, taxes, compliance, and all that stuff that comes with it, they become advisors under the Savvy umbrella, but still manage their own book of business, still have their own name, etc. And then they get access to all of the proprietary software that we've developed in-house in order to really drive that modern experience and automate away that middle and back office.
Yeah. So effectively, what typically happens is you have RIAs scale up using conventional software that's available to everybody. And then they basically get to a certain point where they potentially start developing their own stuff and they bring all that stuff in-house. And you've taken, I won't say it's a full novel approach, but a pretty novel approach of basically saying, no, we're going to concurrently do this. We're going to scale while we build this solution simultaneously. And that way we're not taking on legacy and having to worry about migration. We're putting together the entire stack along the way. So you're more of a, for lack of a better term, a tech-led, right?
That's absolutely right. Yep. Doing it concurrently is the main difference here.
Excellent. So before we get into the experience, actually, no, we'll come back to this question in a second. So let's talk about the experience after all. All right. So talk to me from the client standpoint. I deal with an advisor who is a client of Savvy Wealth. What does my experience look like start to finish, from discovery to onboarding to maintenance? Just go through those three. And how do you feel that contrasts to what people are seeing elsewhere?
Yeah. So from a client's perspective, let's assume that you get introduced to Savvy and you want to work with a Savvy advisor. The discovery process is really working hand in hand with that advisor to understand a few things. One, you're usually looking for something specific, whether it's, I need a financial advisor for X, Y, and Z reason, right? So there's that discovery process that happens, and that's a very kind of personalized one-to-one relationship that gets built up with the advisor at Savvy. After that, generally what will happen is we'll come up with a proposal on, hey, here are all the different ways that the advisor, along with the Savvy platform, can help you, the client, achieve the goals that you set out, whether that's investment related, maybe there's a financial planning component, maybe there's something related to, hey, I want to do cash flow analysis, whatever it is, that's the proposal that comes up. And that's the experience that the potential client is getting. All of this stuff, the advisor has all the tools that Savvy provides to construct that proposal, to come up with some of those recommendations or understand how to actually best navigate that, which is much more streamlined than having to draw it up from scratch every time. So let's call that the discovery part. After the client has decided, after you decided to sign in and say, I want to work with you, the advisor who's at Savvy, that's really where the onboarding comes in. So we have a fully digital onboarding flow, which means that there's no paperwork involved, no kind of extraneous questions asked, no edge cases. Everything can be done in a less than 15 minutes, all the way from getting all the information about the client, which could be a household of multiple people. We get all the information on their goals, which we've collected also as part of the discovery, and also all the information on their existing accounts. And so the onboarding flow and the systems that we have support any kind of accounts that the client has, along with any custodian that they may already be at, with all the different permutations. That onboarding that step happens in that less than 15-minute period. Clients can do it themselves. Advisors can assist, whatever combination there. After that onboarding, when we get into the maintenance, really the bulk of what the service is, that's when the client gets access to the client dashboard. And that's the main source for the client themselves. they're now going to get to see all of their accounts in one place, whether it's managed or not by the advisor. They get beautiful visualizations, performance reporting, all the nitty gritty in that one place across all their accounts. And it's also a centralized hub for storing all the files, all the communications, all the different tasks that they may have to do or they might want their advisor to do in that one place. This is all this tooling that is surrounding the advisor. There's no we're not a company that's trying to hide the advisor in any way. The advisor using this as a way to help the client understand their portfolio and understand their goals and work with them on an ongoing basis. I'll pause there.
Excellent. So you got that, and you got, so basically you made it cleaner, simpler, streamlined, automated, and less painful. The exact experience you went looking for, which unfortunately you couldn't find.
That's right. And a lot of that started from there and continued to improve.
Okay. So then let's talk about the advisor standpoint. To me, it looks like the benefits are obvious, but walk me through the feedback you're getting from people who basically chose to move over to you.
Yeah, I'll answer it this way. We actually had a company on site where everyone flew in. We do it once a year. And it was good fun. And one of the questions we actually asked some of the advisors was, if you had to describe Savvy and the Savvy platform in one word, what would that be? And I promise this wasn't scripted. Everyone came up with their own answer. The folks that we asked that question to all had the same exact word, and it was efficiency. And that is the experience that the advisors are getting with the Savvy platform, whether that's through the technology and the dashboard they have access to, all the different tools that kind of come associated with it, the operational and marketing support, compliance handled for them, all of that drives that efficiency, because what they're finding is they're spending less time on those tasks and actually more time with either prospective clients or their existing clients. And that feels good, right? They don't want to feel like they're mucking in the mud and spending days and days on tasks that should generally take minutes or hours.
Unfortunately, you just described the experience of just about everybody in the industry. You're hitting on so many strong notes. Every conference I've ever been to for the last, God knows, also every conference I've ever been to, period. We can do all this, but unfortunately, these systems don't talk to each other that way, or the data is not good enough, and blah, 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 all that other stuff. And you basically said, you know what? Solution is just to clean slate it and not worry about these integrations. It's to worry about building that unique, streamlined, simplified experience and basically provide that as an advantage to those who basically work with us. So smart.
That's the approach. We have a rule: single. It basically no data should be entered multiple times, right? So it's only one copy of data anywhere. And if we need it in different systems, it needs to have an integration that flows the data from one place to another.
Speaking my language, it's also sounds like a massive dream in my world, but nevertheless, you have to live in a better world. So talk to me about what you built here in terms of the breadth of it, because there's a lot. Looking at like your service offering, there's a lot here that technology needs to touch, and a lot of data needs to be collected. So where did you go initially? How have you built since?
Yeah. So initially, and we'll talk about it from the advisor's perspective, because that's really where the breadth comes in. The first piece that we built was actually the onboarding flow. What we heard, and actually the way that we approached this problem, was we spoke with a number of advisors. This is before we had fully even launched. And we listed down all the different things an advisor may do on a day-to-day basis. And that list was almost 200 plus, right? They're not doing all of those things on a day-to-day, but they're picking and choosing depending on what needs to be done. Then we looked at it and said, what is the frequency of something that happens? And what is the pain point today as it stands? And effectively, high frequency, high pain is the ones that we wanted to prioritize first. Counterintuitively, at the time when we were starting the company, we actually found that the onboarding of clients is, whether it's completely brand new clients or opening new accounts for existing clients, it was constantly the number one or number two pain point that was identified, and with enough reasonable frequency that it made a lot of sense for us to focus there. So that was the first product we built. We actually thought that would not have to be something we'd have to do, purely because we thought there might be a solution out there that could support all the complexities with digital onboarding. So that's where we started. After the onboarding, really, there's a huge chunk of work, which we just call the advisor dashboard, right? This is the operating system, so to speak, for the advisor to be able to do everything on a day-to-day basis for the maintenance and really driving that customer experience for their clients. That's where that breadth comes in. And the best way I can articulate that is that it all centers around our CRM, because the CRM is where it's the single source of truth. It's the system of record for all the client data, the advisor interactions, all the notes, everything in one place. And then all the different modules are built on top of that. So before I dive in, basically the way to think about it is onboarding is able to get the information and get clients set up. That flows into the CRM, and all other interactions and integrations happen from the CRM outwards. With that in mind, what are all the different things that the advisor dashboard is doing on top of the CRM? I'll list a few. The list is pretty long. There are things like the day-to-day working with clients, which is integrating in and handling financial planning, performance reporting on their existing investments, handling investment management, and which is maybe there's a rebalance, maybe we need to make some changes based on what we've learned. And those are the more active parts of the client relationship. You have things also that happen somewhat in the background where it's billing and handling that, to compliance. And this is for the advisor to be compliant with all the different pieces as well, to things like risk analysis, right? Where how is the portfolio performing from a risk perspective? And then what is that versus where we think that the client should be based on what their risk tolerance is. So those are some of the core pieces of working with the client. And then lastly, the other pieces here are all around sales and marketing, which is advisors themselves want to also grow their practice. So what are the different sales and marketing tools that we can provide them to actually help and make that easier? I'll stop there. We can delve into each of these things, all a ton of stuff that builds
I think
into it.
there's a lot there. And here's what I got to say too. I'll go back to now. Be clear, you're not building everything in house, right?
That's right. We have most of it in house. One or two integrations that are still third party.
Okay, fair enough. So talk to me about the decision on the build versus buy piece, right? Like at what point do you basically say, hey, this is something we can just code ourselves versus this is something we need to go to a third party for?
We actually have we start with a no ego rule, right? There's no points of doing everything yourself. So if you can get help, or in our case, can leverage third-party integrations, you might as well do it. And the way that we start is that for everything that we want to build, so we just think about, okay, what is the right way to build billing or reporting? And we go and take a look, or any of the third parties that exist today, are they good enough and credible for the requirements that we have based on the advisors we service today and then also want to service in the future? If they are, then we take a crawl, walk, run approach. The crawl approach is, okay, let's take that third party and find the most minimal integration, which is how do we just get the data that we have into that system and vice versa? So that's basically taking out the load of copying the data in, which it tends to be over 50% of the pain of just copying data between systems. That's how we start with the crawl. The walk approach is basically, okay, we know that this third party is working for us. So then how do we integrate it in from an experience perspective into the advisor dashboard? Some firms might call it white labeling. Ours is, okay, how do we design a completely unique experience in the advisor dashboard that is still able to leverage some of the third-party integrations? So think of it as it's still in the back end, but not visible in the front end. And then the run approach is effectively, okay, we've really tapped out on the functionality of the third parties. And now we've grown the requirements and the needs so high that we actually need to build a lot of this stuff internally. And that's when we say, okay, this is when we need to go and build that functionality in-house, either augmenting the third party or replacing it completely, because we can't just rely on them any longer. We need to in-house that software development. That's the approach. We have some products that we actually just went all the way to that run stage, quote unquote. Onboarding is an example where we couldn't find anything that was really compelling to integrate with. In other cases like financial planning, we actually started with a crawl approach saying, hey, there are some good tools out there. And while we do run into some limitations, we haven't gotten it enough to get to the run stage on that particular module.
Interesting. That's a good way of thinking about it. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to basically suggest that there's a difficulty with that with advisors in many cases, right? Because everybody wants hey, look at this shiny thing that does everything, right? And it's like this vertical specific thing that's got to be a lot of big depth and is best in class. And when you come out with something you build, you're going to crawl, right? Like you're going to start off with the version 1. And there's got to be some frustration in return. So is this a selection bias? Like people come in knowing that this is going to be the case and they accept it, or they've learned to trust you? Like how do they get past the entire, why can't I have it today?
It's a good question. We asked ourselves this initially and still ask today, what is it that has allowed us to do this crawl, walk, run and not have everyone asking for everything under the roof? And the best answer I can give here is that the focus for the advisors that we're bringing on board to the Savvy platform today has really helped in that sense. And what I mean by that is what we are looking for from bringing on advisors, they generally will have similar kind of needs and wants even though they might manage their practice and the way that they work with clients might be different, it's not outside the box in terms of there aren't outliers and outliers in every kind of situation. And that actually helps because then the window of what we need to build is somewhat, it overlaps quite well. And that's really reason one. And I think reason two is that they're often not coming from institutions where they had access to a ton of other software that they can just pick and choose. So truly, the Savvy experience is a large upgrade from where they're coming from, which we think actually helps in the sense that they do trust that we know how to build these products. And then they're also working and giving feedback to the product and engineering team on a daily basis. And they see the changes come in. So that builds the trust up of saying, okay, look, maybe this small feature may not be here today, but in a couple of weeks, it'll be here and it'll be better than anything they've experienced before.
Yeah, I think it also helps in, again, they know what they're getting into when they're joining. Now, the other piece of this, the counterpoint to it, is because they're not servicing the needs, that software is not servicing the needs of 75 different practices, all their own special, unique flavor of vanilla, whatever else it is. I'm just picking a number, 175, 15,000, doesn't matter. Point is that you can really hone in on the core features that matter versus the superfluous stuff. Now, that said, I'm sure your advisors will ask you for their favorite flavor of vanilla when it comes to things, because there's nothing more amusing to me than sitting in round tables of software companies with their vendors and with their clients, when they're just like asking for things that are like, why would you want that? It doesn't make any technical sense, but I want it, but it doesn't actually work. Anyway, it's always amusing. And frankly, again, selection bias. You must be attracting people who basically are forward thinking about this entire thing, very tech focused, see the appreciation. So I'm sure a lot of people just you've had advisors look at it and say, that's nice, but I want this. So if you don't support that, I'm gone. And it's a great litmus test for if they're going to work well with you or not.
That's a fair characterization. I think even the ones that may say that they want a particular piece of software, I think we do try to really present a view of, hey, here's how it works with the Savvy systems, and here's why we think it's better. And honestly, if we didn't think it was better or if it wasn't a good fit, we're upfront about it as well. And the answer is, hey, maybe we're not the right fit right now, and maybe we'll be in the future. I will say that hasn't happened in the last, call it 6 months. We've had resounding success in evaluating how an advisor is running their practice and really checking the box on a lot of the ways that they currently do it, and if we can support it as well. And I think that grows to show that, look, over time, as we've seen more and more use cases and have the ability to build that breadth up, we've actually now found that most advisors running their practice are overlapping with the functionality that we have in what we can offer.
Excellent. All right. So that's where you are today. Hey, talk to me about where you see it going, like how you keep on building up this tech suite that nothing's ever done. Is there anything big that you're really looking at incorporating in the next little while is getting you excited?
So I think there's really two big areas. The first one, which may be obvious to everyone now, is everything related to artificial intelligence. And the way that we think about this, and we have been thinking about it prior to the boom of ChatGPT and all the other stuff that's going on, is what can artificial intelligence do to drive some of those business outcomes for advisors? So if the goal is efficiency, how can you use artificial intelligence, and specifically these large language models like ChatGPT uses, et cetera, to actually drive the results that advisors are looking for when they want a platform or automated workflow? So the way we approach it is, okay, this isn't client-facing stuff. This isn't even automatically doing anything. It's really generating things that the advisor may take longer to do manually. And that's things like summarizing a meeting, for example, which is a common thing that they might want to do, especially because they might have a number of clients and they want to just summarize it for the next time that they might meet that client so they can easily access that. Or generating content for marketing purposes. And there's a number of these different use cases that we've really found that resonate and work well. So our roadmap on the use of artificial intelligence to augment, let's call it the workflow automation that might exist today, is really what we're thinking about and what we're excited about. I'll put that as area number one. And I think area number two that's coming in the future is what we call expanding the financial products universe. So one of the things here is that we talk about technology and making the advisor more efficient. And one of the key components here is the advisor is limited by what they can offer their clients and what the tools that they have or financial tools that they have to work with in terms of clients. So the more that we can give them the breadth of different kinds of, let's say, alternative asset managers access, all the way to things like direct indexing, which we have in-house, or other kind of services like estate planning and tax. This breadth, the more that we can start offering, the more the advisor is capable of actually working better with their existing clients and winning new business, because it differentiates in their approach given the breadth that they have. That's an area that we've now started to actively invest in beyond what I would say a more traditional RIA would.
Excellent. At the end of the day, I think most of us as advisors just want the stuff to go away. We just want the stuff that makes it difficult, that prevents us from doing the fundamentals, from basically spending time with our clients, from literally adding value to go away. This is the promise of artificial intelligence to some degree. It's also the promise of platforms such as yours, which could be paired with it as well. So good work. So before we to wrap it up, there's 3 questions I ask everybody to end on a positive note. The first one is, if you had one wish for something you could change in the industry or your company, what would it be?
I think the one wish for me in the industry is really embracing and looking at technology as a tool to augment the advisor. I think we've spent an entire decade where technology has become antagonistic to a certain degree, where it was all about these Silicon Valley software companies coming up with the robo-advisors that are going to kill the industry, et cetera. And it's made it harder for companies to really think about it as technology is a great tool to add on to existing expertise. Financial advisors have an extreme amount of innate knowledge about how to give financial advice and work with clients. And so to speed that up or to enable them to do that even more, we can think about technology as a way to augment it. And I think if we could remove that resistance, that'd be huge.
Yeah, it's also get the incentives, right? They typically look at replacing because, hey, they want things to scale. Whereas at the end of the day, there's only so much scale an advisor, a human being can handle. And I think that accepting the fact that there's a way to augment that person to be more effective and therefore still get some of those benefits versus the thought that you're going to digitize everything and have no human beings, that's what a lot of them have to wake up to, unfortunately. But there you go. Second question I have for you was, what's been the biggest challenge in the company to where it is today?
I think there's a few, but I would say the biggest challenge has been in the initial phases, the 0 to 1, where it was, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which was we're almost doing 2 things, building 2 businesses at the same time, right? One is an advisory business, working and bringing on advisors, handling the operations compliance. And then the second is building all this software and doing it so fast that we need to be able to cover the breadth in order to be able to service all the different things an advisor and client may need. And in the earliest days, it was a challenge because you had to find advisors that really did believe in the future vision because we didn't have everything built out yet. And that was tough, right? You're asking people to take a bet on something, especially in what I would call a little bit more of a risk-averse industry. And at the same time, you can't be building software that's low quality. You need to make sure it's high quality, especially when you're talking about dealing with people's money. So those days were hard because you have to really search relentlessly, really get people bought into the vision, but then be careful about how you build it. And I think that has changed over time now. It's, I would call, everyone kind of feels we're past the 0 to 1 phase now. And a lot of it is about executing. But that operational challenge of that dual business, of really building it up, probably the most difficult for us.
Excellent. So it's not surprising, especially those early believers. Hey, you could turnkey something with a bunch of other vendors, or you can trust us to build something that's going to be a beta version for a while. And then, yeah, it's a tough value proposition. Now it's self-perpetuating. It's basically growing by itself. So well done. Last question I have for you is, what excites you the most about what it is you're working on and keeps you getting up out of bed in the morning to keep on fighting the good fight?
This actually is something that goes back to my background is studied computer science at University of California, Berkeley. And as a former engineer in my past life, the thing that always excites me is making something people want, and more specifically, actually seeing that happen. And so the thing that keeps me really excited every day I look forward to is seeing that we're able to solve problems for advisors. We're able to build something that actually makes the advisor's life easier and helps them achieve whatever goal that they have. And then also trickles down to the end client experience as well. And that's what I go for. Put all the business metrics aside. Obviously, we want to build a large company here, but the day-to-day, just seeing what a difference the platform and working hand in hand, the technology and the advisor team kind of hand in hand does, I think gives me a lot of satisfaction. Make something people want.
Excellent. Ritik, thank you so much for taking the time. Greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to chat.
Pleasure. So that was Ritik Malhotra, founder and CEO of Savvy Wealth. Hopefully, if you are an advisor looking for a digital platform and are willing to consider working at a innovative RIA, here's your option. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever your podcast. Until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.